So maybe we don't like the majority rule or the approval because it doesn't give us a chance to say, I like this candidate the best and this candidate sort of middle and this candidate least. Notice that the approval method and the plurality method, the majority rule method, both either are sort of yeses or nos on the candidates, okay? Whereas there might be some middle ground. And ranking methods give us a way to write, give us some ways to build in some middle ground. So basically what you're going to do in any type of ranking method is going to assign a number to every candidate. Okay? And it's going to give you a best to worst situation. Now usually the best is going to be the highest number and the worst is going to be the lowest number. But there are occasions where it's the reverse of that. Okay? Now, I want to stress something. If you have 4 candidates, A, B, C, and D, the natural way to start ranking these, maybe I say I like B the worst, so I rank it as a 0. And C, I like the second, so I'm going to rank that as a 1. A, I'll rank as a 2. And my favorite candidate down here is D. I rank that guy as a 3. So when we do these rankings, and the rankings is from 0, 1, 2, and 3, that's called the Borda count, okay? But it is not the case that every ranking method is the Borda count. You could have devised a method where the lowest guy got 0, and the next to lowest got 2, and the next to lowest got 10, and the next to lowest got 100. Okay? So there's a lot of different ways that you actually can rank with numbers. I don't want you to assume that everything is with the Borda count. We're going to use Borda count for our examples. But there are situations where you don't want to use Borda counts, where you want to rank, based on something other than that. All right, the first way to determine a winner in the ranking method is just to add up all the points, okay? And the candidate with the highest number of points wins. So essentially, this is the method of counting points. So let's do that, and you should be able to do this on your own. So push pause on the video and determine who wins in this situation. Here we have 4 candidates and 7 voters. All right, so you should have done this, and I'm going to just write some things down. Here, candidate A had 11 points, candidate B had 12 points, candidate C had 11, and candidate D 8 points. Is that right? All right, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 8 points. So in this case, obviously, candidate B is the winner. Now, I want you to notice something on this. If this would have been the majority rule, meaning whoever gets the most first place votes, notice A and C would have each gotten 3 first place votes. So there'd be kind of a runoff between A and C if this was a majority rule. They would have tied. Candidate B didn't get any first place votes. So even though counting points, candidate B wins, in other methods, other candidates would have won here. Now here's some of the advantages for counting points. Now it does seem logical. Whoever has the most points should win. Okay? But sometimes, like we've seen, well, we'll talk about disadvantages on the next slide, but it seems logical. And for a computer, it's fairly easy to count up lots of points. Obviously, if you had 10 million ballots, you wouldn't want to do that by hand, but you could feed them through a computer and it would count up points fairly quickly for you. Now, here's the big takeaways of disadvantages of counting points. All right. Obviously, candidate B here was our winner, right? We saw that, candidate B. But candidate B may not have won against a head-to-head runoff between the candidate B and a different candidate. In fact, if you look at this, let's focus on candidates B and C. Well, candidate C would have won voter 1. Candidate C would have won this one, this head-to-head matchup. So candidate C would have had 1, 2, 3, 4 votes. And candidate B would have had 1, 2, 3 votes if this were just a head-to-head matchup. Okay? So as a head-to-head matchup, C would have won. Okay? And that's sort of a disadvantage of counting points. Now, I'm not saying that's the only place where these head-to-head things work out. It turns out this head-to-head problem is a big issue on almost all of the type of ranking things that we do. All right. Another problem is that you could have taken votes away from a loser and changed the outcome. Now, what I mean by that is, well, we could have, I'm thinking a good situation here. We could have, for instance, said, you know what, let's get rid of this point for B. Let's re-rank D and A as 0, 1 here. All right. And in fact, let's do that for voter 7 as well. Now notice that all I did was I took away points from a loser, specifically here D. All right? And I gave those points to another loser, specifically here A. And also, if you think in these two situations, if you pay real close attention, at no point in time did I put candidate A above candidate B's ranking. Okay? But now all of a sudden, candidate A has 13 points to candidate B's 12. So I can take a vote or take votes away from a loser, and all of a sudden the outcome changes, even though I didn't have to re-rank A and B. I didn't have to put A over B at any time. And that sort of idea means that also the game can be kind of played. For instance, if I really like candidate C, and I know that B is going to come in close, so let me pretend that I'm voter number 1 here for a second. Actually, let's do voter number 1 here for a second. If I really like candidate C and I know B is going to come in close, maybe instead of giving that person a 2, I give him a 0. And I know D is not going to come in very close, so I'll give him the 2 instead of candidate B. And all of a sudden, again, that disproportionately puts votes in candidate C's favor. Now, that could obviously backfire if enough people do it. If enough people do it, then you may get candidate D with lots and lots of points all of a sudden because nobody thought that candidate D would win. But in this case, if just one candidate does that, then, or one voter, does that, then it can be gaming the system. So let's move on to a different method, and this method is called sequential pairwise voting. So you have an agenda, which by agenda I mean just a list of candidates, all right? And what you're going to do is you're going to go head to head. And you're going to go head to head, each one at a time. The winner moves on and the loser is out. If you have a tie, you both move on and you sort of a three-way vote off, okay? And you continue through the agenda like this until there's a winner. Now, when I say we're going head to head, I mean just who would take the votes? Who would take the votes on a head-to-head battle? All right. So let's do some examples here. So our schedule is going to be A, B, C, and D. And it's helpful to me, to write this down in this way and then say, okay, starting out, our agenda, our schedule is A, B, C, and D. So A and B go head to head. All right. So on a head-to-head matchup, B would have gotten this vote, would have gotten this vote, would have gotten that vote. A would have gotten that vote, that vote, that vote. B would have gotten that. So B wins in that matchup. All right, because they would have gotten 4 votes to A's 3. So B wins in that matchup. Next matchup will be B and C. All right, now I'm going to write this in blue. C would have won that one, would have won that one. B would have won that. B would have won that. B, C, and C. So in this matchup, C wins. And then if we look at C and D, let me write this one in something else. Let's say green, I guess. So C and D. C wins that, D, 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 C, C. So C wins 4 times, D wins 3, C wins. So candidate C wins overall. Okay. So I hope you kind of see how that works. We're just basically saying who gets more votes head to head. All right. We're not doing any counting or anything like that. Just who gets more votes head to head. Now let's change up the agenda. Let's change up the sequence. A, C, B, and D. And just like last time, I'm gonna start here. A, C, B, D. So in A versus C, I'll do this in black. C is gonna win first. C is gonna win that one. A, C. So A wins 4 times. Okay, therefore A is the champion in that head-to-head matchup. Next will be A versus B, and I'll do this in red. So A versus B. B wins this. B, B, A, B. B wins that. And now B takes on D. All right, so B and D. B wins that. D, D, B, B, B. So B wins 5 times to D's 2. So B is going to be our winning candidate. And in fact, it's going to be the winning candidate of the whole thing. All right? So with this schedule, with this agenda, we had B win. I want you to push pause and try to, this is the exact same agenda, exact same vote thing that we had before, but I just want you to try to figure out if you had C, B, A, D, who would win in that scenario? Push pause on the video and then come back in a few seconds. All right, in this case, C, B, A, D. C versus B. Okay, I'll do this one in blue. C versus B. C wins that one, B, 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 C, C. So C takes it. We have A and D left. So C versus A. C versus A. C wins, C wins, A wins, A wins, A wins, A wins, C wins. So obviously in that case, 4 votes for A means that A wins. A versus D. Well, actually I'll do this in purple. A, D, D, A, D. So 4 votes for A means that A wins. So candidate A wins in that situation. All right. So there you go. With that schedule, candidate A wins. Now, I'm not going to talk about too much of the advantages, but the disadvantages should be really clear here. All right. If you didn't notice yet, we had the exact same voters, the exact same numbers, and with 3 different agendas, we got 3 different candidates who won. So the big disadvantage is that it depends on which agenda we pick. All right, it depends on how the sequence goes in certain occasions. Obviously, if one candidate gets all of the first place votes, then it's no big deal. But it depends on the agenda in the situation that we saw. And a lot of times it does depend on the agenda. Okay. Also, it's not condorcent because, again, we see often that you're picking, in that last case, we got A, which was our winner, but, you know, there was another candidate who could beat that person head to head. Okay. Now, I want to point out that, again, I've mentioned in the introduction that we don't always, we're dealing in the political realm or in passing motions and things like that. But this is actually very commonplace in some of the one-on-one battle type sporting events, like the UFC or MMA and boxing events. Oftentimes, somebody has to fight through, 3 different people. So if A is here down on the totem pole, he has to fight through, a couple different guys till you get to the champion and then face that person. All right, and in some things, that's perfectly fine to do. I'm not saying that that's a bad way to do it, but maybe there's a candidate A who keeps getting beat by B, but would eventually win in a matchup if it was just A and D. All right. By the way, if you're ever in a situation where the sequential pairwise is happening, if you paid close attention, it's clearly the best to be close to the end, to be the last person who's challenged. Okay? Because that last person who's being challenged only needs to beat one other person. Whereas if you're in the beginning, you need to beat every other person. Okay, so clearly if there's a sequence, you want to be the last person on that agenda. Now another system is what's called the Hare system. All right. And it turns out the Hare system has some really interesting advantages. Okay. And basically how it goes is you continually delete the least preferred. Okay. And then when I say revote, I'm not saying you actually have to physically go into the polling booths again and revote, but just that the ranking system gets changed once you vote. All right, and if there is any ties, then you're going to delete everybody in last place. If there's a tie for two people at the top, then you need to break that tie with some other method. Okay. All right, so let's do this. We're going to always assume people don't switch preferences. So we're going to eliminate the least preferred candidate. Well, in this case, if you look at, we're doing counting points here. If you count the points, who's least preferred? C is least preferred, has 2 points. Everybody else has more than 2 points. So what you're going to do is you're going to say C's out. And when we say revote, so we're going to eliminate candidate C. When we say revote, we're just going to renumber what our votes were. So for instance, let's look at voter number 1. He voted A as 0. That was the least preferred. And then D was 1. Now, since we had 4 candidates before, we ranked from 0 to 3. Now that we have 3 candidates, we have to re-rank them from 0 to 2. Okay? So voter 1 would say A is 0, D is 1, B is 2. Voter 2 would say, all right, this is D is 0, 1, 2. Voter 3, 0, 1, 2. 4 is 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2 for 5. So after we've eliminated candidate C, we get the 0 through 2 votes on candidates A, B, and D. All right, and there they are. Okay, so now, once we've done this, and we've kind of cleaned things up, obviously, in this slide, now we have to, again, eliminate another candidate. All right, so let's see, least preferred here. Candidate D has 3 points. Everybody else has more than that. So eliminate candidate D. And now I've eliminated a candidate. I go back up and rank, and in my re-voting, it's either 0 or 1. So this is a 0, 1. This is a 0, 1. That's a 0, 1 already. This is a 0, 1. We've eliminated candidate D. I should put that there. 0, 1. And now it's basically, again, another eliminate. All right, so who's the least preferred? Least preferred, clearly here is B. They have 2 votes. A has 3 votes. So we've eliminated candidate B. And the winner is candidate A. All right? So that's how the Hare system works. Now, the Hare system tends to have some advantages. In fact, there's some people who have really praised the Hare system, okay? Because it's not quite as likely to be gamed, all right? Because if you're trying to rank candidates, if you actually think candidate B is the second best, but you're worried about your candidate losing, so you rank, let's say A is 3, it really doesn't do you any good to rank candidate B as 0, okay? Because if it's going to be a runoff system, eventually this is going to turn to 0 and 1, regardless of whether you ranked A as 3 and B as 0, or if you ranked A as 3 and B as 2. All right, you're still going to end up as 0, 1. So it is a little bit less likely to be gamed. Although, again, any system can be gamed a little bit. All right? And voters tend to be more satisfied. By progressively getting rid of the least preferred candidates, voters, it turns out, tend to be more satisfied. And just as a point of note, in fact, this system is employed in various settings. One of those settings is picking the next Olympic venue. There's typically 4 countries who get asked to do, or 4, cities within countries that get asked to do presentations on hosting an Olympics. Okay? And when people pick the Olympics, what happens is least preferred always gets eliminated. Okay? Now, in the Olympic turn, they actually go and re-vote, all right, each time. So the least preferred gets eliminated, they go and re-vote. And then the next least preferred gets eliminated, they go and re-vote. And then the next least preferred, and they do this 3 times, eliminates 3 cities, and the last one standing is the winner. All right? So people tend to be more satisfied, and again, the Olympic Committee does a slight version of this. Now, winners in this case are not always condorsant, just like in every case. In fact, in all of these ranking systems, I hope you've realized that you really can't guarantee the condorsant condition. Not every candidate is ever always going to beat all the others head to head. You can always end up with this 3-way, A beats B, B beats C, but C beats A kind of deal. All right, and it could get a lot more complicated than this. Okay. Also, you can move a winner up and change it to a loser, which is sort of counterintuitive. But you can move I'll just say you can by moving the points around, you can change things around in really kind of odd and crazy ways. All right. Because, just the head-to-head aspect of it. But again, it is a lot nicer than some of the other ranking systems. Although it's hard to do. And another disadvantage is that I don't have up here is that it does take time. Every time you eliminate a loser, if you're going to do the Hare system, a lot of people will force to revote. But even if you're not revoting, you have to renumber and then apply the same method again, and apply the same method again. And that does take time to do.